Hello, my name is Dell Weightman. I was born in 1942, July 5th, and I've been asked to do a narrative on some of the history of Lindsay here and surrounding areas. And I know the first one is, remember the population of Lindsay in 1947 was about 7,000 people. So it certainly has increased substantially since then. And 1950s, I know I was about 10 years old. I used to go to the Indian Woods an awful lot. There was a park over on St. Patrick Street, called the White's Field before it was actually made into a park, a community park. And we used to gather there Saturday mornings, and a whole group of children and so forth would way out to Indian Woods. It was north of town. And for generations that took place. And there's so many things about Lindsay that I really liked over the years, and I really appreciate it. I really appreciate the fact that I was born here and raised here. And we had a nice river going through it. Of course, it's still there and everything, and we used to watch the boats and things like that. And used to line up against the bridge. There used to be a shoe store. It didn't know a shoe store, really. It was a cobbler, just in the corner of where the bridge goes over the river there, Lindsay Street Bridge. And I remember him being there for many, many years. I used to take that walk across the bridge to St. Dominic's school. It was a boys' school, across the MacArthur's funeral home. And there was this convenience store on the corner, Burke's. This is back in the 50s and 40s and 30s. And the school was run by the St. Joseph's nuns. And I was at that school for 6 years. And it was like just for boys, and I got a lot of my education there. And then they tore the school down, or the school closed the school in 1954. We all moved to the co-ed, girls and boys school, just behind the church, Catholic church, on Lindsay Street. And there's so many things about Lindsay that are really worth passing on in history and so forth. And I know there was a soda fountain in a drugstore right across from the old police station, which was on the corner of Cambridge and Kent. And you just go in there and you could get sodas and all the things that you need at the drugstore. Of course, the library was next door, and there was Victoria Park. You used to play baseball there. And you used to knock the baseball right into the, right out onto the Lindsay, right on into the Lindsay Street. So that'd be kind of careful there. And a lot of artesian wells there too. And of course the armies were there, and it wasn't too many years before that where they actually, they had not a battalion, but they had a number of soldiers and so forth. And they turned it into a kind of a cadet place for older boys to practice in and so forth. Les Frost, he married Gertrude, and his brother Cecil Frost, and he married Alberta. There's Alberta Carew and Gertrude Carew, two sisters and two brothers, and their office was on the corner of Kent and Cambridge. There were many years. Les, and of course Les went off into politics there, as we all know. Became premier for 12 years, I believe, 1950 and 62 or 60, those years. Other things, I remember going a little down to the Kent Hotel, and believe it or not, when I was a little boy walking past, going to school there was a blacksmith shop, called it Kane's Blacksmith Shop. And of course they closed that many, many years ago. And of course they don't need any horses anymore, there was mostly cars. And I remember seeing beside the tree, in Kent, there used to be a lot of maple trees, and there was a big bike with a big, kind of a penny farthing, they call it, and a great big wheel in the front of it. I remember seeing it parked beside a tree there, against the tree, right in front of the hotel. So I guess the person was in getting a drink or whatever. And at that time there was all kinds of trees all over the downtown, lining up William Street and Lindsay Street. There was all great big maple trees. I know St. Dominic's School had a whole bunch of trees around it, and they were all, or more so planted like very old trees, lovely trees really, but of course the roots would get into the sewage and so forth, so they had to do away with them. A band concert in Victoria Park. They used to have a big building there. It was a little building, but it was closer to the Kent Street. They have one now that's further back. And I forget, it was named after Mr. Banks or something. Anyway, it was a nice little spot. They met there quite a bit. And there's a lot of things. Charlie Lamb had an auction sale every week or so at the Crossman Academy Theater. And the Academy Theater was a big, beside the building beside, there was a big sell sign there for many, many years. And there's all kinds of people that were quite notable in town, like Stan Pitts and a lot of these people that made a name for themselves over the years and so forth. And running the paper, Mr. Wilson ran the Post for years, and Mr. Blackwell, the Blackwell building, and actually at one time Ernest Thomas Seton lived just outside of town, and I'm sure he must have visited Lindsay quite often. For a while he lived in I believe the Blackwell family. He kind of stayed with them for quite a while, and we used to go down with behind the river there in the big boats that come up the river, steamboats and passenger boats and so forth. And he used to go out into Lake Sturgeon there and visit Sturgeon, different places along Sturgeon Lake in the early part of the century, and then before my time actually. But I recall different stories about it. I remember as a little boy I used to go down the river fishing, and I could see them working in the Carew lumber yard making shingles and so forth. And they used to have boats there. I used to go out there and bring the logs in down through the Schuylkill River from the North Country, when or Boyd's were in Bob Pigeon and so forth. But Carews did a lot, and there were different sawmills and so forth. There was a bullfights in 1958. I was a Boy Scout, and I was up there as an usher. And it was quite a thing because they were brought to Mexico. They had to be quarantined for a while in Canada. And I remember the chief of police was actually, he thought he was going to brave, so he jumps into the bulls there. And actually the bull chased him and hit him, or give him whatever you want to call it. And he flew right over the fence, over the boards there. Lindsay's full of surprises. There were only bullfights in the whole country of Canada. And so over the years like that, there's many, many things I could share. Gregory's Drugstore, for years, 100 years. And then it kind of went out of business over the years. And but myself, I worked at the Victoria County Gaol during 1966. I stayed there. I wasn't there for an awful long time, but I stayed there for a while. And it was quite an experience. Really had to with just 2 guards, and just one guard was locked the other guard into where he locked up the prisoners. But it was you had to be kind of careful, because if you got in trouble, there was no one there to help you, and you had to phone down to the police. And if you were locked in there with 6 prisoners that you had to put in their beds and so forth, in their separate cells, you wouldn't get any help until the police got there. When I was here employed in 1966, Mr. Wilson, I believe, I forget his first name now, he was my boss really. But anyway, I remember one chap there, he was quite I won't give you his name, but he's quite a fighter in town. And I locked him up one night, and he told me, well, before I locked him up, he said, Dell, you'll not put me in the cell until I hear about bail. It's bailed out here. I don't want to spend the night in jail again. And at 7:30 I go and I go around the cells and give them their medicine and lock them in their individual cells. But I didn't hear nothing. Nobody phoned to tell me they were going to bail them out or anything, so I was getting kind of nervous. I'm not a fighting person. Anyway, at 25 after 7, his mother phoned and said, I'm going to come and bail him out. And I just remember being relieved. And whenever I visit the jail, I go directly to that cell, and I just open it to get an idea of that little experience there, how it felt. But anyway, at 25 after 7, his mother phoned, like I mentioned, and I mentioned that to the person that brought it out, and that took care of that. He went into his cell and gave him his medicine and locked him up until his mother came. There were a lot of experiences there, like the OPP would bring people in. I remember one time the OPP brought a fellow in, he was laying there, he was drinking, and I asked the officer, where'd you get this fellow? And he says, on the highway. And the fellow was inebriated, inebriated. He was really in bad shape. And we did put him in a cell, but we got all kinds, mostly men. I remember one lady there, she was drinking. We had to kind of take care of her until the matron came, but that was the only lady I can remember. But we had a lot of men and women, a lot of men, just maybe for assault or whatever like that. And I know I met different friends of mine that we had to kind of, they were kind of glad to see me. And either they were glad to see the police, they didn't like the guards, or they liked the guards and they didn't like the police. When the police came, they had to leave their guns with us in the office there. Now, a lot of them, I don't recall actually doing that, but they were supposed to do that. So nobody would be in the quarters with the gun on. But there was any interesting, they ate downstairs. We had a kind of, remember, for margarine, we had just a little container there, and it was just like liquid. And it was, we used to paint it on the bread, paint it on the toast with a little brush. And that's how you got your toast was. And occasionally there, they used to have cans of fruit, big cans there, and if you weren't watching them, they would kind of push them, so they'd fall on the cement floor and they'd break open. And of course then they'd hide the things behind the other cans, and they'd ferment, and they'd get a little bit of drink there. And there was one case there where I was going down there checking on them, and I noticed they were kind of not just as steady as they could be on their feet. So I knew something was up. And we discovered an old container, a Javix container, I believe it was, hiding behind the water fountain. And it had a kind of a string. And they pulled the string up, and so there was little tricks you had to kind of watch out, because there was all kinds of ways to get alcohol. And so they had to kind of watch for any weapons there. They used to watch for razor blades. They put them underneath their shoes and underneath their heels or whatever, and slip in. But you had to be very, very careful. And I remember one time there was one chap that it wasn't just right anyway. He came up there and there was a table there, upstairs there, and he turned the table up, and there was pigeons used to land on the side of the window there. And he took his clothes off except for his undershorts. He got a feather, and he put it on his hat, and he would run around the table. I just remember that. Comical things like that. Of course, a lot of them used to call it the Crowbar Hotel. And they used to stay here for the winter time. And that's how they'd break a window downtown or something and just spend the night there. And they'd all kinds of things back in those days where they kind of put chains around your feet or whatever, around your legs, where they had used to do the molasses too. Of course, that went out years ago, but at one time it was no, and even 100 years ago, there's a place at the back there where apparently there was one or two persons hanged. There was quite a lot of experiences in that. I enjoyed that 7 months. That was really I worked with my father there for a couple of times. My father worked there, so it was quite an experience to work in the county jail there.